Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, right. Mm-hmm. 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 Right, right. So let me cover some of the things that I have. Mhm. Right. Right. So if I understand your question correctly, what you're talking about is there are cases where it may be difficult to move to an agile development and you still have to continue with waterfall. And while you continue doing a waterfall development, how do you bring an agility to your release automation? Let's tackle that question if you can pardon me, and then maybe we can talk about it. Let me just go through this flow. There are few things that we can take away from what I'm going to talk about in terms of bringing in the tools and tool sets. So, so basically application release automation, it's the primary purpose of this to help shorten the release cycles. If you already have agile development, it further boosts your ability to release cycles, but as you said, in certain cases, if you do not have that, then still it is going to shorten at least the downstream of your software delivery. A quick definition without jumping into it. So basically it's just the Wikipedia definition simply aligns with what you're talking about is how do you simply automate everything that you are doing once your code is ready, right from deploying right from packaging the code, then deploying it, or there could be so many other things that you do downstream, which those processes could differ from organizations to organizations, right? Each organization or even within an organization, a single different applications may have their own release processes that they follow. But on a high level, application release automation simply saying that automate that entire process and reduce the manual activities as much as possible. Now, the biggest question, how to do ARA? Now, let's talk about that. So, if we all of us agree that ARA is important, all you need to do is, and something we have already spoken about, right? So, all you need to focus here is what's the downstream flow of your code? How do you automate this entire software delivery? That's in a nutshell, application release automation is about. Because if your company has already partially matured in terms of, they've already got you're already doing development in an agile method by having sprint cycles. You already have put in continuous integration in place. That means you've already taken few baby steps towards shortening your cycle. Now all you need to focus now is on the downstream, right? How do you pick up each of these things that you do? And there could be different things that you may be doing in this. We'll take a deeper look. We'll double click on what typically happens in this downstream process. And we spoke to like 100 plus customers while, as a company, we have been trying to build a product in this space, which I'll touch upon later. I do not want to, go into that because I want to keep this as generic as possible. But in order to understand this downstream process, we spoke to 100 plus customers across different geography and tried to understand what are the typical activities which happen in this entire process, right? On a high level, I'm guessing that all of you would have test environments, you'll have UAT environments, you'll have pre-prod, staging, whatever you call it. There would be certain activities you would be performing and doing some checks and balances in each of those environments, and then your code would be progressing from one stage to another stage. But while having said that, on a high level, while this would be the process, there'll be some uniqueness in the way you are doing it, and that is what we wanted to understand when we spoke to those 100 plus customers. So let's take a little deeper dive, and I'm sure you'll be able to relate to each of those activities. And if you just think about the release processes that you have in your own organization, you will see that each of those activities that we'll talk here, you would be performing one or more of them for sure. And then if you pick up these activities, you'll be able to completely automate your release process. So you would be doing machine provisioning, as some of the speakers were talking in the morning, right? Create infrastructure on demand, whether it is for dev test cycles. Those are internal infrastructure you may need for setting up those testing environment. In certain cases, you may create those environments once in 6 months and once in 1 year, but in certain companies it is done almost every sprint. Whatever the case may be, you need some infrastructure, and this could be an on-demand infrastructure creation. You would definitely be packaging your code for sure before it gets delivered. You need to package the code. Now those deployment or the packaging mechanism may be different from organizations to organizations. You may be using a Jenkins build to put it in a WAR file, jar file, or whatever, depending on what's the code you're using. Or if it's a pure desktop application with DLLs and EXEs, there could be a different packaging approach that you may have, but you would be packaging your code in certain way. You would then have some way to deploy it, because once you package it, this needs to be deployed in test environment. Then you will perform some testing. Then it needs to be deployed on UAT or staging and so on and so forth. You will have some mechanism to deploy, whether these are automated scripts that you have written to deploy, Perl, Bash, or whatever, or you are using some of these tools like Chef or Puppet or any other latest tools. This is something you would be performing. Then I'm sure you will have automation testing. This is something has been in the market for long, and everybody tries to push this in their own organization, that let's automate all the testing. I'm sure reality is that it's very difficult to achieve 100% automation testing, but I'm guessing you will have certain level of automation happening already in your company, where you would have written those test cases in JUnit, Selenium, whatever the case may be. Depending on the kind of application you may have a different requirement. So by the way, keep one thing in mind, that we are still not talking about the tools that you would be using. It's a high level. We are talking about what are the activities that you would be performing. We haven't yet started getting into what are the tools that you're using behind the scene. You would have some certain approvals, because the dev to test movement probably can happen automatically, but once the application progresses towards production, you want to be careful. Not everything can go to production, right? Maybe not even to staging or pre-prod. Somebody needs to approve. Maybe even a QA to stage movement of the code needs to be certified by a QA manager, saying that yes, I have done the testing, I have done the load testing, everything is looking good. There has to be some approval, at least in the downstream, as you get closer to the production. There has to be some notification beyond a point, which may or may not be there, but the stakeholders needs to be notified how the release is progressing, whether there is a particular release in a UAT environment or it's in stage environment, what's the status, how many test cases are passing, failing. There has to be certain notification. And once you have pushed it to pre-prod or anything like that, you need to monitor what's happening, right? I mean, somebody was talking about monitoring the health of the application, which in most organizations start early on, right? You start monitoring the health of the application, even in a pre-prod. In certain cases, I think Vinodhini was talking about moving certain boxes and putting the features only in a certain boxes, where you could probably do it even for log monitoring purpose, where you say, hey, let me put this new piece of the code only in 2 out of the 100 boxes and see what is the kind of logs it's generating. So all of these things are activities that you're performing irrespective of what are the tools. I mean, a quick question to the audience. Now, is there anything which is missing which you do in your release process? I know there could be few more custom things, like you may have your release process integrated with something like a Bugzilla or Jira ticket, where you keep updating what's the status. But this, in our opinion, is covers majority of the things that in a typical release process you do, and this we have understood after talking to many customers. Questions to you guys: is there anything that you can think of which is completely missing, which you do in a release process?
What you also look at in Siemens is static analysis, but that's also automated. So in one way, it can fall into.
Is it handled by the continuous integration or? Okay, okay,
It is part of the, it's more or less, it's difficult to segregate. So
okay.
will the state checks happen and then it's passed on to the real applications?
All right, all right. Anything else that you guys can? Can you repeat that? Uh-huh.
Whatever you built is now going through production. You need to check the variants and see whether it is in matching.
Right, right. Yes, yes. So yeah, I mean by log monitoring, probably I would put that in that category, saying that let's monitor the logs even in the pre-prod and see if everything is looking good, and then do any diff before it actually moves to production. Anything else? Right. So the reason I didn't mention the code coverage or something like what she's talking about is because we said the journey of application release automation, in our opinion, is starting from continuous integration server. And what we are assuming here is some of these things like code coverage or unit testing has already been taken care by your continuous integration server. The whole reason we want to have a continuous integration server is it's only getting packaged if everything, it's a green flag. The unit testing is happening, has happened, the code coverage has happened, your continuous integration server has said, yes, this build is looking pretty good, go ahead and take it, right? So the reason we said we'll focus on downstream, whereas some of these activities definitely happen in the upstream, as you said, but yeah, we can definitely, I mean, there is a thin line between from where to start, yeah, upstream, yeah, yeah. So if we are on the same page that these are some of the activities, and what a typical application release automation tool needs to do is simply help you automate all of this, and then help you create a pipeline of let me stop there, and help you create a pipeline by using which you can automate all of this, pick and choose these activities in whatever sequence you want to do. In certain cases, you'll say, in my dev environment, I will create a machine first, and then I will deploy it, and then I'll do automation testing. But QA environments, I don't provision machines because the QA team already has set up their boxes. So I will skip that provisioning activity. I will simply go and deploy my code in an existing boxes, and the same thing will happen in your beta and UAT. And by the way, approval will come into picture once the code has to move from testing to UAT. Now those processes could be unique to your organizations, but what a typical application release automation tool needs to do is help you stitch all of this, and a prerequisite of that is you should already have some tools behind the scene which are helping you automate some of these activity. So in our definition, application release automation is not necessarily helping you automate this. You could still use the kind of tools that you want to use for any of these things. For machine provisioning, you can either use VMware's product, or you can be directly provisioning on the AWS or on the cloud. For packaging, there are thousands of tools available. You could be using any of them, and so on and so forth. And again, automation testing is a completely application-based requirement. But the release automation tool should help you stitch all of this and help you create a pipeline, or help you orchestrate the whole flow of how you want to do it, in what sequence, where do you want to put checks and balances, what stages you need some gating to happen, some approval to happen, what is your criteria for testing, whether you are okay with 80% test cases passed from a dev to test movement, all those things. So any tool that you pick up, again, there are multiple tools, and I'll just show you what tools exist in the market today. Any tool you pick up should help you orchestrate this entire flow without changing your release process. There might be certain tweaks that you have to do in your release process, but the idea of release automation, ideal release automation tool is that without changing much of your release process, and let you define the release processes to you, and should simply help you orchestrate the entire flow. Does that make sense? Yeah. So.
One of the things I guess missing in this is rollback aspect.
Right, right.
So what is the, I mean, does this also provision for rollback or roll forward, either ways? And as a addition to that question, what happens when there are database changes? How does the rollback process work?
Right. So
automated?
Fairly good question, I would say. Thank you to you. You pointed out the rollback. Rollback is a very important piece in any software delivery. If you go by the definition of continuous delivery, so let's talk theory first. If you go by the definition of continuous delivery or Devops says there is no rollback. It's all move forward. Something is going wrong, fix it, move forward. There's no looking back, right? So if you pushed something to production, you broke it, don't roll it back. Simply fix this, and if version 1.19 you pushed, it failed, quickly push 1.20. There's no rolling back to 1.18. That is what the theory says. But I know it may be, depending on the maturity level where you are in DevOps, it may be a little difficult to implement it. But as you rightly said, a good tool should definitely have some rollback mechanism. And by the way, we have also deeply trying to understand this rollback mechanism while talking to these customers. And one majority of the customers or organizations have some sort of rollback script ready-made once they start the production push, right? So they will have the production script, push a script, and they will also have a rollback script ready where if something goes wrong, they will run this script which will help them roll back. And a typical release automation should definitely help you in doing that, where while you are actually designing it for a sunny day scenario, but you should have support for handling that cases.